Welcome to the Gnostic Hub. I'm your host, Elizabeth. It is an honor to have you with us once again in this marvelous journey as we seek answers to the most basic questions that have captivated men throughout history. Our goal is to provide you with the guidance needed in helping you achieve a more holistic lifestyle. I sincerely hope you enjoy this week's topics, for it will give you a clear understanding to so many stories that have been read for hundreds of years. Most of the stories we are going to hear about today have been taken at face value by most readers. But these stories we have read about in the Bible might seem like a stretch of the imagination or simply an impossible task to achieve. Today's topic is alchemy in the Bible. First and foremost, let's find the definition of alchemy. The first definition we find in the dictionary states that alchemy is a medieval chemical science in speculative philosophy, aiming to achieve the transformation of the base of metals into gold. The discovery of an universal cure for disease in the discovery of a means of indefinitely prolonging life. But there is a second definition that states alchemy to be any magical power or process of transmuting a common substance, usually of little value, into a substance of great value. Alchemy is therefore any seemingly magical process of transforming or combining elements into something new. Now let's dive into what the Bible tells us about alchemy, but not before giving the clarification that in the Gnostic teachings, alchemy refers to the secret act between a man and a woman of rising their sacred energy. Truly speaking, the Bible has a transcendental amount of alchemy written in it. The great alchemists of the Middle Ages were able to turn water into wine. They were also able to transmute coal into diamonds. Therefore, it is clear that they also had achieved and conquered the secrets of human sexuality. For it is well known that only through conquering the power of alchemy, one can achieve the marvels of changing water into wine. Unfortunately, at the time that those great alchemists were alive and worked these wonders, the normal common people living at the same time, they were not able to understand what the alchemists were achieving or what they were doing in their labs. This is clear now because we have seen that great alchemists, those from the Middle Ages, alchemists like Nicholas Flamel, the Count of Saint Germain, Count Cagliostro, and others of the Middle Ages, they were forced to leave all their knowledge written with symbols, which is only understood by those who have taken the time to carefully study alchemy and have done their very own research and experience. So let's get started with the Bible and the Genesis. And we turn the page and immerse ourselves in a place known as the land of Eden. It is said that in Eden there were 4 rivers. Those rivers are, of course, symbolic. Many people have tried to actually find these mythological places, but little do they know that once again, these places are not real. They ignore that Eden was not a place to be found on the physical plane. No, no, no. It is a place that belongs in a different dimension, the 4th dimension. It is said that the land of Eden is directly related to our human body. And as we were saying before, in Eden, there were 4 rivers. 2 of them represent the men's gonads, and the other 2 represent the woman's ovaries. From here, these forces are born and saturated the land of Hivala. That land is actually the representation of the dorsal spine. Now let's talk about another example we find in the Bible. This time, we will focus on the story of Noah, also known as Noah's Ark. We must understand that all the stories found in the Bible cannot be taken at face value. No, no, no. Most of the information and stories told in the Bible are filled with symbolism. It is not truly a physical representation, not a material representation. No, they are mainly mythological symbols. In the logical sense, there are at least 8.7 million different species of animals in the world. It would take over 1,000 years to count them. Imagine if someone would have to pair each one of them. Logically thinking, it is an impossible task. It would be impossible to build a place or an ark to house them all. There wouldn't be enough room for all of them, or water, or food to keep them inside for 40 days. Therefore, it is not feasible to house them and maintain them. Let's also remember that in the story of Noah and his family, they were the only ones that were able to board the ark. So we understand that this story and all of the animals in the ark are just symbolic. Yes, it is true that there was a flood, and that the flood was one that happened in one of the old continents. But in the Bible, this ark with all these animals inside is a representation of ourselves. Because you see, when we first start studying about Gnosticism, or when we first start on our journey or a spiritual journey, we come with a lot of animals. Or better yet, those animals that are a representation all of our psychological defects. Defects that we know as desire, pride, gluttony, lust, grief, anger, etc. We need to start. We need to start by controlling those animals inside us. The flood is also a symbol. It is the symbol of all the tormenting waters inside us. Those waters are the waters of lust. It is said that Noah went inside the ark with his family. But what that means is that him and his entire family all started at the same time their spiritual journey. And it all started before the great flood. So we see a bit of reality mixed in with symbolisms to describe how Noah, the prophet, started his spiritual journey. So the Bible tells us that Noah went into the ark for 150 days. It is what the Bible tells us, but not truly what its meaning is. Noah went in and started working on his waters, the waters inside him, the internal waters, the waters that represent a man's lust. And when we say men, we're talking about men and women. This process is a very, very difficult one, for it means to control the desires of the flesh. Later on, the Bible continues telling the story by saying that after 40 days, Noah sent the raven out of the ark, searching for dry land. The raven is also a symbolism. It is the symbolism of Saturn. And Saturn, in fact, is the symbolism of death, but not physical death. No. It is the representation of a mystical death, the death of our psychological defects. The great work that the initiate or the student needs to conquer in achieving the disintegration of his own ego. As the story of Noah develops, and later in the story, Noah sends a dove this time, looking for dry land. In this instance, the dove comes back to him after 14 days, and it comes back with an olive branch in its beak. This represents that the waters previously addressed as restless and agitated are now calm. Those waters that before were agitated by lust now are calmer. They are also not as dark because they are turning white. The raven was black, the dove is white. This change from black to white is what the alchemists call as the control of the lustic energy now turned into chastity. As the story develops, Noah starts to show and to have full control of his lust, full control of his desire. And further in the story, the Bible tells us that Noah arrives to dry land. The dry land here is the representation of the super existential bodies, also known as solar bodies. The solar bodies are needed to be created. We don't get them automatically. Those solar bodies are also known as astral body, mental body, casual body, etc. Once the student or the initiates start building those bodies, he's on his way to developing a higher being because he is awakening his consciousness. All those elements that we read about in the Bible, specifically about Noah's Ark, are mainly symbolic. There was no boat, no ark, no collection of animals. It is all a mere symbolism, and it is used to share the knowledge, but there is no evidence of it. So, with regards to the Great Flood, well, as I said before, that actually did happen in the old continent of Atlantis, which was submerged, as it was told by Plato in his writings, and described what the continent was really like, their advancements. He also related how the entire continent was submerged with this great flood. If we are careful and we pay close attention to the words in the Bible, we find another very interesting story. The story of the Ark of the Covenant. And let me tell you something. The Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant, well, these two arks are one and the same. They both allude to the same thing. It is a mere symbolism of the internal work, the internal spiritual work each man needs to do to eliminate their psychological defects, also known as the ego. The next story we are going to discuss is the story of Moses and how he led the Israelites out of the bondage from the hands of Pharaoh. It is written in the Bible that Moses was told by God to raise the serpent on his staff. But if we were to interpret that all Moses had to do was to get a staff and it will automatically turn into a serpent and all he had to do is raise it, which Moses was to raise, as a matter of fact, in front of the Pharaoh to intimidate him and have him release all the Israelites, we would be wrong. We would be wrong to accept that analogy. Moses was instructed to raise his energy through his dorsal spine. And it is not a serpent, no, no, no. It is a fire, an energy that normally rests at the coccyx level of our spine. And with the right spiritual work of disintegration of the ego or the psychological defects, this fire rises from the coccyx all the way to the brain. This fire is known to all Buddhists as Kundalini, also known in the Catholic tradition as the Holy Spirit. This fire is as thick as the string of a spider's web, and it rises through the spine, vertebrae by vertebrae, until it reaches the brain. In this journey upwards, this energy also is in charge of activating all of our chakras. The Bible also has another story, that of the patriarch Jacob. It is said that Jacob fell asleep over a rock. A rock is also a symbolism of a reproductive energy. The rock is mentioned in several paragraphs in the Bible. It is said that while Jacob had fallen asleep on a rock, he had a dream. And in the dream, he said angels were going up and down a ladder. This is well known as Jacob's ladder. It is said that when he woke up, he anointed the rock. The rock in this story is talking about a symbol of our energy, the power enclosed in our reproductive organs, the energy responsible for allowing us the power to disintegrate all of our psychological defects, also known as the common person as the 7 deadly sins. This rock is also mentioned in the story of David and Goliath. Once again, I'm stating that these stories in the Bible should not be taken at face value. We are to take the story of David as a symbolism, for David was the student, the initiate, and Goliath was the symbol or the representation of his own ego. As David killed Goliath with one stone, once again we repeat the same element, the rock, the stone. We need to understand that the rock we are talking about is not a rock like what we will find in the garden, outside. No, no, no. The rock is mentioned many times in the Bible. But the rock, if we are not understanding all the symbolisms, that means that we are not able to understand the true meaning of the Bible. The rock we are talking about is our own energy. Now we move towards another story in the book of Genesis. We are going to revisit the story of Moses. The story of Moses goes somewhat like this. Moses as a baby was saved by the Pharaoh's sister from the Nile River. Literally, we need to read the story but also remove the fantasy from it. It is said that the baby was put in a basket, but here we go again. The water is truly a representation of our energy. The waters in Noah's Ark, the water in Moses' story, the water work with the waters, that element. It is only produced by those that practice alchemy. Someone who practices chastity means that they use their waters, their internal waters, to do their spiritual work. It doesn't mean that the baby Moses was put literally in a basket and then put in a river and saved by the Pharaoh's sister. No, no, no. That is not what it means. It means that after Moses, had completed his spiritual journey, his internal water, his sexual energy had given him the chance to achieve greatness. But once again, let's make this clear. He was not a baby. He was an adult. He was like a child because he had achieved his innocence. And let's just remember how in Matthew 19:4, Jesus says, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them." He didn't mean the children literally, like all the little children. No, no, no. He was referring to those initiates that had eliminated all of their psychological defects and had disintegrated their ego in order to achieve the rank of being like children. All initiates, all students need to do their own alchemic work. All great patriarchs that have achieved chastity have been able to achieve it because of their alchemic work. But there's also another important item that we need to remember, and that is that all these patriarchs, they have not done the work by themselves. They were not alone. No. They had the need to do this work with their wives. Moses achieved his chastity just like all other patriarchs before and after him, all initiates, all apostles and prophets. They have been sent to earth by God. They have to do their alchemist work with their wives, as stated before. For example, Moses had his wife Sephora. Jesus had a companion named Mary Magdalene, as it is stated in the Gospel of Philip. Buddha had his wife Yasodhara. Krishna had his wife Rita, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we see how all initiates throughout history have had a wife to be able to do their alchemic work with them. It is also commonly known that the great alchemists have also been able to achieve immortality. And on the subject of immortality, most people believe that the only immortal individual to be known has been Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ. But truly said, nowadays it is known that there have been many, many others that have been able to achieve immortality. And they probably don't make it as public so that everybody knows about it, but there have been others that have been able to achieve this immortality. On the subject of immortality, most people believe that the only immortal individual that has been known of has been Jesus Christ. But nowadays, it is said that every 20 years, about 30 immortal beings get together in Turkey. Once together, they study the destiny of humanity. So there's quite a few people that have been able to achieve immortality, but don't make it public. And that is the reason why many of us ignore such greatness, and it is all achieved thanks to the sacred energy cultivated in the energy created between a man and a woman during their sacred act. Another story in the Bible that creates incorrect assumptions is the story of Samson and Delilah. This is another story worth talking about. As we all know, based on the story, Samson fell in love with Delilah. Everyone was amazed by Samson's strength, and nobody knew where his strength came from or how he was able to achieve it. But when he fell in love with Delilah, she asked him where his strength was coming from. So he confided in her that his strength came from the 7 dreads that he had on his head. He didn't mean literally the dreads on his head like we would visualize. He meant the 7 kundalinis he had risen after much work and by keeping his chastity. Unfortunately, Samson failed to keep his chastity and practice acts of lust with Delilah. And that is how, after he had wasted his energy, he also lost his strength. As said in Leviticus 15 to 18, we find the following statement. If a man has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in water and be unclean until the evening. Everything made of cloth or of skin on which the semen falls shall be washed with water and be unclean until the evening. So, if a man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen, both of them shall bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. What this statement is referring to is when a man and a woman commit an act of lust and semen is lost, they need to bathe themselves. But that doesn't mean to wash yourself with soap and water. No, no, no. It's an allegory to an internal and spiritual cleansing. The cleansing needs to come from inside. This is not an exterior cleansing. Finally, we will talk about the story of the 3 wise men, also found in the Bible. This story tells us that when baby Jesus was born, 3 wise men, or better yet, 3 kings, came to see him. One was black, one was white, and one was yellow. They were all wearing crimson capes, and they all came bearing gifts. One gave the baby Jesus incense. The other king gave him myrrh, and the last one gave him gold. The incense is the representation of the mental element. The myrrh is the representation of mystical death. And the gold is the representation of the spiritual work or conscious awakening. Therefore, the color of the skin of the kings that are named on the story represent our spiritual state. First, we start with our waters black, just like in the story of Noah, tormentous. Then, as we move towards our conscious awakening, our spiritual work, our waters turn white. First, they're grayish, then they turn white. And finally, they become yellow, just like sulfur. So when we get to that state, means that we have achieved our main goal, which is conscious awakening. And that is the process. We go from black waters to grayish white waters to having our fire already within ourselves. With that, we conclude this week's video. But make sure to come back next week where we will be discussing another amazing topic to help you reach that end goal to creating a greater holistic lifestyle. As always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Gnostic Hub to receive notifications of our weekly video uploads. So let it be written, so let it be done. See you all in the next video.